Good evening, everyone. My name is Jiza Page, and I chair our Housing and Economic Development and Small Business Committees, and I would like to call this meeting to order. The intention of this public hearing is to review the proposed 2019 operating budget for the Housing Committee, as well as the Economic Development and Small Business Committee. And we have with us this evening Director Demita Brown of the Office of Diversity and Inclusion and Director Steve Shoney, the Director of Development. This is the first year that I had the opportunity to serve as chair of the Economic Development Committee, and I've chaired our Housing Committee for the past 3 years. I am very passionate about our growing economy, about opportunities that are offered to minority and small business owners, creating additional jobs, and providing affordable housing. That's why it has been a pleasure to chair both of these committees. The Department of Development is specifically responsible for housing, code enforcement, economic development, land redevelopment, and planning, and that department works to improve our capital city's economy. The Office of Diversity and Inclusion works with workforce diversity as well as supplier diversity and has been charged with the disparity study as well. I would now like to turn it over to Director Demita Brown, who will talk to us briefly about her department's operating budget for 2019. Thank you, Director.
Thank you, Chair Page. First of all, I'd like to say it's been an honor to work with you over the past year as we have continued our work in advancing the mayor's objectives related to workforce and supplier diversity. Our 2019 budget is really a continuation budget which enables the Office of Diversity and Inclusion to deliver upon its core functions in workforce and supplier diversity. A key component or a major component of the 19 budget is the restaffing of the Office of Diversity and Inclusion Office to include the hiring of an office assistant, supplier diversity manager, workforce diversity coordinator, and business development specialist who will be tasked with working with the departments and our small businesses in enabling them to get access to contracting opportunities. We will continue to execute upon our core missions to provide certification and contract compliance services to our minority and women business community. We will continue to focus on our business advocacy and support, our business outreach and education, workforce diversity training, diversity recruitment, which includes advancing the mayor's goal of increasing diversity within our police and fire, and the execution of additional City of Columbus-led career fairs to gain opportunities for our residents to gain employment with the City of Columbus. In addition to those core functions mentioned, as you stated, we also will continue our work in completing the disparity study, as well as implementing the 2019 Small Business Conference, which is our efforts to connect our small businesses with real opportunities to do business in and with the City of Columbus. I'll stop there. If there are any questions, I would be happy to answer them.
Thank you, Director. I do have a few quick questions. I know that this year your office saw a reshaping, and I believe there were 11 current staff members. Is that correct?
Yes, we went from 11 down to 3. I'm sorry, 4.
And in 2019, you will add an additional 4 positions, so that would take your department to 8 full-time employees.
That's correct.
Okay. And are you comfortable moving forward with the additional 4 that the 8 will be able to meet the goals and needs of the office?
Well, the 4 that I mentioned will actually be the initial round of restaffing. Our full authorized strength is for 11, and we anticipate that we will be very close to that, 11, maybe perhaps 10.
Great. And then if you could just talk briefly about, and these are things that are going now, the roundtable discussions that you've been having around the community and how that is, possibly looking forward to 2019 and your goals.
Sure. Thank you for the opportunity. The community meetings that we are currently hosting has really been our opportunity to update the community on our office, what's been happening throughout the year, as well as sharing our accomplishments. In spite of the fact that we have had a reduction in staff, we've seen enormous goals that we've accomplished over the past year. In addition, with the disparity study delays, it has been an opportunity for us to really get out into the community and provide a status of where that study is and gain feedback from our constituents with respect to any concerns that they may have. We have also utilized those community meetings as an opportunity to help us understand how best to reshape our office so that we can have maximum impact to the communities we serve. From a small business perspective, helping us to understand what truly are their needs and how we can perhaps play a role in helping to advance and grow our small business community. And from a workforce diversity standpoint, understanding what are the barriers to employment with the city and how we can work with our internal departments and other partners to shore up those barriers and make sure that people truly have an equal opportunity.
And this is my final question. I know that this year your office put together a career fair that was very well attended. Is that something that you plan to do in 2019, and is that included in your proposed budget?
Yes and yes. So we will continue our efforts around the career fairs. We are partnering with the Ohio Diversity Council, which will allow us to reach a much broader audience. We're looking at probably about a reach of 10,000 at that particular event, and we will have a minimum of one large career fair and several smaller career fairs that will be led by the City of Columbus with the sole intent of increasing our diversity within the City of Columbus.
Again, thank you, Director.
Thank you.
Our next presentation will be from Director Steve Shoney, the Director of the Department of Development. Welcome.
Thank you, Councilmember Page. Just let me start off by also thanking Director Brown. She has been a fantastic partner of ours. We're pleased to consider ourselves part of her team as we look to move forward on diversity and inclusion issues. And I would echo the comments that the director had about the value of getting out and doing those diversity and inclusion outreach sessions that she's been doing. I attended one, I've had a couple of my staff at the other ones, and they really have been helpful for us to connect with the full breadth of our businesses that we serve here in Columbus to really understand what their needs are. So I do want to take a minute to thank Director Brown and compliment her for her work. I have, as always with our budget hearings, I have a number of charts and tables that I want to go through to review the numbers for the Department of Development. As you know, the Department of Development has one of the more diverse sets of funding streams, as you'll find among the departments in the city. The department has a total proposed operating budget of $47 million for 2019. This includes $26 million in general fund revenues, or 57% of our budget, and $6.6 million from community development block grant, representing 14% of our budget. The remaining 29%, or $13.8 million, is comprised of various funds that we use to meet our operating needs. And I could actually tell you, I think, what all of those acronyms mean if you really wanted to quiz me on those. In terms of where the money is spent among our different divisions within the department, for the general fund budget, we have allocated $7.9 million, or 30% of our general fund budget, to the Code Enforcement Division. $6.6 million, or 25%, will be allocated to the Housing Division. This includes $5.7 million to support the efforts of the Community Shelter Board. $5.7 million will assist our administration division to provide administrative and operational support needed to execute the core mission of the department. This also includes $2.4 million for the support of citywide social service agency funding. So, and I'll talk about this a little bit later in my comments, despite the title of administration, there is more than just overhead in the department within this category. There is a fair amount of program services within this budget item, and I'll talk about that later when I go through each of these one by one. We have $3.6 million to allow our Economic Development Division to leverage city assets to help businesses of all sizes grow and thrive in Columbus. This includes $1.2 million to support job creation and entrepreneurship in our city. $2.1 million is allocated to our Planning Division. This allows us to ensure that as development happens within our city, it is enhancing the physical character and the livability of our city. And finally, from the general fund, we have $680,000 to support the Land Redevelopment Division, better known as the City Land Bank, to improve our neighborhoods by returning abandoned and underutilized properties to productive use. In terms of staffing, we are flat for this year. We have 2 positions that we are adding. One will be in the housing division to help support our lead abatement program. The other will be actually in the director's office. We are moving Kevin Wheeler into position that will be coordinating with primarily the departments of Building and Zoning Services and Public Utilities to re-examine our growth policies and look at how we are growing as a city. We have had a kind of mantra that is driven by water in terms of how we've handled expansions and annexations and those kinds of things. We are looking to how do we modify that to reflect the modern situation that we live in. And then also he will be working with BZS very closely to look at the zoning code and how can we make the zoning code more clear for our residents and for those who are trying to develop in the city. We had a number of accomplishments over the last year, and Councilmember Page, you were deeply involved in many of these, so I will thank you for all of them rather than stopping and thanking you for your help on each of them. We completed the residential tax incentive policy overhaul. We still have a little bit of work to do, and hopefully we'll be extending that policy to the downtown neighborhood in the next year, but we made great strides in really fundamentally reforming how we do incentives. We similarly had a fundamental redesign of how we handle neighborhood planning, going to the Columbus Citywide Planning Policies, C2P2 as it's affectionately known, within our planning division so that we're bringing best-in-class, state-of-the-art, whatever you want to call it, planning to each community that we work in and being able to take a single set of principles around the city and operate with those so that there's clarity around the city in terms of how we develop. When you have 225 square miles of city, having a standard set of policies like that is really important, and that's not something the city's done in the past. We secured nearly 3,000 new and retained job commitments. We reduced the we achieved a significant milestone in the reduction of vacant and abandoned properties. We've reduced the number of vacant and abandoned properties by 40% since 2012, including 751 vacant and abandoned properties eliminated in 2017. And then finally, we provided 7,501 people with shelter with an anticipated 10,000 people, and we anticipate hitting the number of 10,000 by the end of the year. So in terms of our strategic priorities for the next year, we are going to be focused on 3 areas. 1 is neighborhoods, 2 is economic development, and 3 is operational efficiencies. In neighborhoods, we will be looking to leverage the 2 major policy changes that we had last year and really consolidating those gains, if you will, and that is with the residential tax incentive policy, making sure that that's implemented fairly and efficiently and effectively will be a major priority. Similarly, extending the use of C2P2, and we hope to increase the number of adopted land use plans by 3 to 4 with the adoption of the Hilltop Land Use Plan and increase the number of communities who have adopted the C2P2 plan guidelines from 13 to 20 over the next year. In economic development, we are in the relatively early stages of a complete small business and entrepreneurial services study to look at from top to bottom how does the city support our small businesses and entrepreneurs and what can we be doing better. Again, similar to what we've seen in other places, we designed some really good programming 10, 15 years ago. Now we need to look at where the world is today and update that programming, and that's the process that Henry Galat and our small business team are leading right now. And then in terms of operational efficiencies, we are going to be very focused in a couple of areas. One is in reducing our times to work in our response times on non-emergency code enforcement requests. We do a very good job of getting out immediately when we have an emergency code enforcement request. Given our volume, sometimes we don't meet the time standards we would like to for non-emergency requests, and we're going to be working on that. And then also, we have just completed a full Kaizen study of our process for public-private partnerships in cooperation with the Departments of Public Utilities and Public Service. Implementing those efficiencies should lead to a great streamlining of how we get major projects done within the city. So if it's okay, I will go through division by division quickly in terms of the budgeting for each of these divisions. For administration, as I said earlier, we spend about $10.6 million on administration. Of that money, about 31% of that is actual administration. So it's Bill, and I should have introduced Bill Webster, who is the head of our finance team, who's here with me to help answer questions. It's people like Bill, it's people like me. It's our team that oversees and helps get everything done and make sure that we're doing things in a way that meets our budgets, follows all the requirements of all of our grants, and make sure that we get things done. The remainder of the budget is primarily focused on the Human Services Grant Program and bringing that money to those who need it the most. In economic development, our funding is split between 4 sources: Community Development Block Grant, the General Fund, the Neighborhood Economic Development Fund, which is a fund that is generated from revenue sharing when a company moves from the City of Columbus to the City of New Albany. We have a revenue sharing agreement with New Albany. That's where that money is generated. And then the Business Tax Incentive Fund, which is based on fees that we get from companies who are taking advantages of our business tax incentives. The funding, the staffing within this division will remain steady. One change in the division is that we have $4.7 million in community development block grant dollars that will be going to 2 community projects along Cleveland and Parsons Avenues. As you know, but for the benefit of the audience, we are shifting some of how we use community development block grant dollars and shifting it away from funding operations of the department and looking much more as an opportunity to fund capital projects within the city. These are 2 projects that we believe fit well within the guidelines of CDBG and are great priorities for the city. In code enforcement, the bulk of our funding here is for personnel. The code enforcement budget is $8.7 million, or 18.5% of the department's overall budget. It is flat funded for 2018. Staffing will remain at 80 personnel. In 2019, we will continue to support our environmental nuisance abatement activities, which include weed abatement, graffiti removal, and emergency demolitions. Additionally, we will continue looking to aggressively use the proactive code enforcement team to work with, or if necessary, against landlords who are not keeping their obligations as property owners within the city, and other property owners throughout the city. So we've had some great success recently, and we hope to have more success with that program. Our planning team is 100% funded from the general fund, and it accounts for 4% of our budget. Staffing levels will remain flat. This is a division where we have had a lot of turnover. We have had about 33% turnover over the last 2 years. We've had a number of folks retire, a number of folks move to other positions within the city. It has given us an opportunity to bring in what we believe is a great new cohort, a very diverse cohort of folks into that team, and we're looking forward to getting them out into the community, into meetings, and doing some great planning around the city. For housing, the housing budget is $12.9 million, or 27.5% of the department's total budget request. The overall housing budget is flat funded from 2018. The largest difference is the removal of $1.8 million in CDBG funds. In order to meet programmatic obligations, the general fund budget was increased by $440,000, and CDBG projects are being funded through capital budget allocation. So though you will see a lot of changes in terms of where the money's coming from a service level perspective, there should be no change. And finally, land redevelopment. The budget request is $2.7 million, or 6% of the department's overall budget. And again, that is a flat funding level. The staffing levels remain flat. The biggest changes we expect to see are a continuation and a deepening of our partnership with the Central Ohio Community Improvement Corporation, better known as the County Land Bank. There's been a lot of talk about how we are attempting to put in place a community land trust. that will help us ensure very, very long-term affordability of properties where we have had ownership of the property. So we are working to implement that. We hope to have some things out on that soon in the new year, and really hope to move that initiative forward. With that, that concludes my formal remarks. Be happy to take any questions from you.
Thank you, Director. And I have a few questions. I may skip, in between economic development and housing, if that's okay.
That is absolutely fine.
Okay, thank you. Can you give a few more details about the $700,000 that's aligned or for Columbus 2020 and what those efforts include?
The easiest way to explain our relationship with Columbus 2020 is that we have outsourced the sales and marketing function for economic development to Columbus 2020. So they are responsible for telling the Columbus story nationally and internationally. They do a lot of great work in terms of meeting with prospects and going out and finding new prospects for the city. So they have been very deeply involved in every major job creation pursuit that we have had. So Cover My Meds, they were our partners at the table for that. Root Insurance. There are a number of them out in the Polaris area throughout the city. Any Okay, I've been at this microphone a lot over the last 5.5 years, and that has never happened before. It's one way to stop me from talking. That's a good summary of where we are with Columbus 2020.
Thank you. Can you talk about the updated process for creating a new community reinvestment area?
Yes, thank you for that question. As part of the incentive overhaul, we have needed to figure out, okay, what's going to happen when we have new opportunities to create incentive areas, when we have projects coming along that are good projects that we want to support and need to figure out whether it justifies doing an incentive. As you know, the entire premise of the new incentive policy is looking at a data-driven analysis that says, if we're going to offer incentives, what should be the level of incentive? So what we start with is when a developer, whether they be a not-for-profit developer or a for-profit developer, has a project, we look at what are the characteristics along 6 different metrics within the census tract that project sits. We analyze that data, we determine which of the 3 tiers the project falls into, and then we ask the developer to go out and talk to the community about their project and talk to the community about the fact that they're going to be seeking an abatement. Once that happens, we will, and if we agree that it's a good idea to have the development there and it's a good idea to have city incentives to go with it, we will come to council, introduce legislation. There will be a first reading. Between the first reading and the second reading, council will have a hearing where the community will have the opportunity to come in and provide input, and then we'll bring it to council for a vote.
Thank you. And can you also talk about any projects or ideas that are underway to promote affordable housing, particularly next year?
Yeah, so the big project that we have over the next year is we have a number of groups that have come together and have either committed or on the verge of committing significant dollars to help with our affordable housing challenge. The mayor has charged the Department of Development with developing a plan for how to use those funds, how to use the city's funds, how to galvanize the community as a whole. This is not just a City of Columbus problem. This is a problem for the entire Columbus region. We're happy to take a leadership role. We feel that moral obligation to take a leadership role. But part of leading is also bringing others along with you. And so one of the challenges in putting that plan together will not only be to say what the city should do, but offer pathways for other communities that also face this problem to contribute to how we together solve these challenges as a region.
Thank you so much. And as you know, I'm very passionate about that, but also making sure that people understand it is a central Ohio issue. It's not just a Columbus issue, and we definitely have to work together with our surrounding suburbs to address this affordable housing crisis. Our city land bank works very closely with developers, particularly in affordable housing, and they have relocated this year with the county land bank. Can you talk about how that's going operationally?
Yeah, actually, it's going great. The county land bank bought the old Parsons Library, rehabbed it, and the two staffs literally sit side by side. So that it accomplishes a couple of things. One is it doesn't require someone who's interested in taking a vacant or abandoned property that we collectively own, whether it's the city or the county land bank, and figure out who's who. They can call or they can show up and talk to somebody, and it's not that, oh, you got to call this number and ask this person. It's literally shouting across the cube, hey, I got somebody on the line, I'm going to transfer them over to you. And that simple customer service element would be enough to have made it worthwhile. The other thing that comes with that is the ability for the two teams to come together creatively and use their different tools, use the different aspects that they have to develop innovative solutions. So, for example, the Longstreet Medical Office Building is a building that has great historic significance to the Near East Side community. I don't know how many people have come up to me and said, you know, the doctor that delivered me had his office. My mom talked about the doctor who delivered me had his office in that building. And we were able to save that building and rehab that building because of the partnership that we were able to develop within that building. And that's just one example of a lot of different things that we've been able to pull those two teams together. I got to give credit to John Turner, who's the leader of our group there, and Curtis Williams. You know, being roommates requires being willing to share space with somebody, and I think the two of them have really embraced that. So it's been a great partnership.
Great, and I was one of those babies who, the doctor that delivered me worked in that Longstreet building. And lastly, what can we expect from C2P2 next year?
So from C2P2, as I said, I think we hope to have, I think 7 or 8 additional area commissions and communities sign on to using the C2P2 principles. What it does is it really helps us kind of replace the skeleton, if you will, that underlies the land use map that maybe was put in place when we thought that every family in Columbus was going to have 2.3 cars and 2.3 children. That's not the environment we live in today. And our residents, both young and old, demand different things, and our plans need to reflect that. And C2P2 is a very quick, very easy opportunity for communities to adopt the latest thought and planning and then modify it to meet their needs within the land use map.
Great, thank you so much. Those are all the questions I have. And before we conclude the testimony part of our hearing, I would like to ask you, Dr. Shoney and Dr. Brown, if either one of you have any additional comments.
I do not.
Well, again, thank you both. We will now go to our public speaking portion. We do have some speaker slips here this evening. Each speaker, as I call your name, if you come to the podium, you do have 3 minutes, and welcome to council. Our first speaker is Ellen Baumgartner. Good evening, and thank you so much for coming down to council today. You have 3 minutes, and if you could let us know any organizations that you are representing. I believe you will be speaking about the budget allocations for housing. Thank you, and it's good to see you again.
Yes. My name is Ellen Baumgartner, as you said. It's a long name. And I represent the Bread Organization, located at 404 South 3rd Street in Columbus. And after reviewing the proposed budget for housing, I know that there needs to be an increase in funding given to the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. Countless numbers of people have quoted the Affordable Housing Alliance on this, that there are 54,000 low-income families in Franklin County spending more than half of their incomes on housing. We are talking about school bus drivers, food service workers, retail salespeople, waiters and waitresses, single parents, people with disabilities, and seniors. Many of them make much less than $42,000. Low-income hard workers have not seen the kind of increase in wages enjoyed by higher income class, yet rents have increased significantly in recent years for all people. Lower income workers really need and deserve assistance. If the city can find funds to help build a new home for the Columbus Crew, surely we can find money to help our low-income hard workers, the disabled, and seniors afford their rent and stay in their homes. The Affordable Housing Trust Fund is an existing way to address this housing crisis for families with lower incomes. So far, it has been effective. However, it needs more funding to meet the current great needs. We need well beyond the proposed city allocation of $1.8 million slated for the trust fund. Imagine the families that could be helped if this council increased the allocation to at least $5 million per year. What would it take to make that happen? Thank you. Something to think about. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, Ms. Baumgartner. Director Schoen, I'd like to give you the opportunity to respond.
Well, I have good news for Mrs. Baumgartner. We provided $6.8 million to the Affordable Housing Trust last year, and I would anticipate that we would do something similar when you combine both our operating and capital budgets. So when you, one of the tricks of city, one of the, not tricks, challenges to understanding city budgeting for citizens is that we do divide our budget into operating dollars and capital dollars. The mayor made a very strong commitment in the spring. He actually increased our funding for affordable housing projects by about $10 million. He committed $5 million to, through capital budget and CDBG programs, he committed $5 million to community development for all people in some of their efforts on the south side, as well as an extra $5 million capital allocation last year over what we had done in the past. And so when you look at our funding for the Affordable Housing Trust last year, we actually effectively increased our funding by $5 million last year, but we did it through the capital budget. And as I've said to folks from the Bread Organization in our private meetings, I hope that they're taking the same message to our suburban partners. Because I feel like we have done the hard work. And the city and the county are the only two groups contributing, the only two governments contributing to the Columbus and Franklin County Affordable Housing Trust. It is not the Columbus Affordable Housing Trust, it is the Columbus and Franklin County Affordable Housing Trust. It is there to service all of the municipalities and townships of Franklin County.
Thank you, Director. Our next speaker is Minister Ashe. He is speaking on housing liens. Welcome to Council. Minister Ashe, you have 3 minutes, and if you could also let us know any organizations that you're representing.
Giving honor to the Most High, to Councilwoman Jiza Page, to Mr. Shuni, Director of Development. I am Minister Kujenga Elia Ashe. I live at 1119 East 16th Avenue, Columbus, Ohio, 43211. I come today echoing what my counterpart, Sister Ellen Baumgartner, said already. Mr. Shuni does a great job. I haven't always agreed with him on everything that he does, but he has a great mind. I think he has a good heart. He does a great job. So I'm appreciative of what he's done. I come today because, out of those 64,000 of us that are low income, which I'm one, some of us at times we have to go to the food pantry to get food. We have to do all kinds, we're on fixed income, Social Security, but we're stakeholders. I'm speaking basically about the stakeholders. we need help. And that 1.8 million Affordable Housing Trust Fund just is not enough. Ellen talked about 5 million. I would say it should be more like 10 million, because we need, we have liens on our homes. Some of them are liens that we don't have to pay off till we die, but we'd like to leave the houses free and clear to our children. So there needs to be a fund to take care of that. You talk about the code enforcement. We need garages fixed up because code enforcement gets on people, fences, things like that. We've built these things, a lot of them with our own two hands, but we don't have monies to pay the fines and keep these things up, over a long stretch of time. We've done the best we could do. So we need that Affordable Housing Trust Fund to be built up to a higher level than what it is, and we need access to that, easy access to those funds. Same thing with development, small development, business development. We need access to funds so that we can have a storefront on Cleveland Avenue and other places. We don't have those funds to do that. And we struggle to, sell our art, sell our whatever, our beads, our jewelry, whatever else we have. We don't have a place to do that. And I think that the city can provide that, as Sister Ellen said so eloquently. If you can, I was at the meeting, the press conference with the mayor this morning, and I talked to the mayor, and I talked to Councilman Remy and City Council President Harden and City Councilwoman Elizabeth Brown, and I expressed to them, I said, great, it's wonderful what you're doing with the stadium and saving the crew. We need that, and we need to have access to this old facility. That's wonderful. I don't have a problem with that. I'm not mad at that. Neither am I mad at the deals that the Columbus Department of Development and the city has with 2020. That's great. We're not mad at that. But on the January the 16th at Milo Grogan at 11 o'clock, Michael Stenziano, Councilman Stenziano, is having who will be going to the auditor's seat, along with President Harding, is going to have a roundtable housing meeting at Milo Grogan Rec Center on January the 16th at 11 a.m. And we're going to be there in large numbers. I'd like for Mr. Shuney and his department and other folks in the city to be able to come and bring us some answers as to how they can increase this trust fund and how we can get access to that to help with the liens on our homes and to help with paying off fines and do those kinds of things that code enforcement wants us to do, because we just can't do it. We just can't do it. So all of that, in summary, I'm just saying, we would, on that meeting on the 16th, we would like to come with our buckets and our, and our bags to get help and to get funding. We don't want to come with our pitchforks and our shovels and our axes. So, we want to continue to work with the city, Concerned Linden Clergy that I'm working with, and other groups. We want to continue to work in harmony with the city to build our city up. But in order to do that, you're going to have to help the stakeholders a little bit more than what you're currently doing.
Thank you, Minister Ashe.
Thank you.
Dr. Shuney, could you speak briefly too about the Affordable Housing Trust and exactly what that funding does?
Yeah, let me begin by thanking Minister Ashe for his continued advocacy. He always does a great job of lifting up those challenges that are faced by the hardworking folks of our city and the folks who are working hard and still struggling to make ends meet. And so I really do appreciate the spirit with which he comes forward and the dedication he has to his community and our city as a whole. As it relates to the Affordable Housing Trust, what the trust does is primarily provide financing options to reduce the cost of constructing new affordable housing, or in some cases rehabbing, relatively speaking, larger apartment complexes. It is an opportunity to, one of the challenges of affordable housing is it doesn't cost any less to build an affordable, it doesn't cost significantly less to build a quality affordable unit than it does to build a quality non-affordable unit. The basics of the economics make it hard, and one of the things that the trust tries to do is reduce that cost to construct or rehabilitate affordable housing and keep it affordable for the long term.
Thank you, Doctor. Our next speaker this evening is Mr. Scott Hurlbert. Welcome to City Hall. Again, you have 3 minutes if you could let us know any organizations that you're representing, and it says here that you are speaking on code enforcement. Thank you, Mr. Herbold, and welcome.
Good evening. Councilmember Page, good to see you again. And Director Shoney, good to be here. Thank you for this opportunity. My name is Scott Hurlbert, Leawood Gardens Neighborhood Association, Homeowners Association, and part of the MAC, Mideast Area Community Collaborative. I'm here to address the immediate need for more efficiency and expediency with regards to code enforcement, specifically Area 7. And I want to emphasize one thing, that the individually and as a team, Area 7 personnel from Supervisor Maria Babb on down are doing the very best they can. They're good people. But it's not enough. It's not enough to return our neighborhoods to a place of vibrancy and attractiveness and pride. Numerous community leaders in the MAC have been heavily involved for as long as 2 decades, myself included, spending an inordinate amount of time noting code violations, reporting those to 311, following up on those cases, and also speaking out about this topic every chance we get. So from a grassroots level, we do our part, and then some. But after many weeks, months, and sometimes years to get a case resolved, there are new ones in the hopper. It is no more than a frustrating version of whack-a-mole in the Midway. But the stakes are much higher than a big teddy bear. And more importantly, there are far too many of these same leaders who either have simply given up or moved out because the results they've worked so hard to achieve have not been forthcoming. And a lot of these things don't necessarily cost the person, the homeowner, money, or a lot of times it's rentals where the landlord is responsible who can afford to fix these things. So just one example of many. Last summer, a vacant lot with long grass at the entranceway to our neighborhood of Leawood Gardens was dutifully called into 311. Over time, some of the weeds grew to 7 feet tall. Right here, I'm 6 foot. I have a photo of myself standing next to a clump of those weeds. It was a full 3 months to a day before the city came out to mow the grass. In 2019, we were asking for a little more funding for Area 7, 1 or 2 more personnel, and simply more attention given to this subject of code enforcement. Budget-wise, it is the simplest and most cost-efficient way to bring about economic development, safety, high property values, and all the rest of it in our communities by fully taking advantage of something that is already in place. City of Columbus Code Enforcement. It is a key element in reestablishing stable, proud, and attractive neighborhoods. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Hurlbert. Director, and if you could maybe speak about the operational efficiencies that you plan to focus on in 2019.
Thank you, Chair Page. And I want to thank the speaker for his compliments of our team. Maria and her team really are dedicated. I had the honor today of providing 4 code enforcement officers who have been trainees, their badges, because they've completed all of their certifications. And I said to the team that they, more than any other group that we have, truly does operate as a team, and they have that sense of everything it takes to provide community. And so I really do appreciate his compliments to my team. In terms of the operational efficiencies that we're trying to achieve, I agree that we're not as good as we can and should be. I think that there is a need to learn some from the experiences we've had, frankly, with the PACE program, both the landlord side of that program and the community-based program where we go and take a community and go literally house to house and then follow up with a dedicated team that's working with that group to be more effective and more consistent. I think there's some learning for us to do from that team about how to be more efficient. I would also, since we're on the subject, I think there is a unique opportunity where we all need to stay vigilant, and that is that Judge Hawkins will be leaving that bench. I would love to be able to say I knew with certainty what the appointment process was, but that's on my list of things to figure out and make sure that we're advocating with the right folks for an effective person on that bench. You, as a former city attorney who was working on those issues, know better than I the importance of having a really good, dedicated, fair person who understands the importance of these issues on that bench, and I think that's something critical that we all need to stay on top of.
Thank you, Director. Our next speaker is Quay Barnes. Again, welcome to council. And Ms. Quay will be speaking about economic development as it pertains to the East Side. If you could let us know any organizations that you're representing as well, and you have 3 minutes.
Good evening, Councilmember Page and Director Shoney. My name is Quay Barnes, and I'm the current president of the Mideast Area Community Collaborative, or the MAC. However, today I'm representing more than the MAC. I'm representing the Far East Area Commission and the Greater Southeast Area Commission, jointly called the Greater East Side. We speak as one voice as we come to you on the hearing on the topic of economic development. The Greater East Side's goal is to be placed on the list of priority areas for developers seeking to establish or expand in the Columbus area. One way you can do that is to assist the Greater East Side in developing public and private partnerships. On the East Side, we don't wait for the city to act. We have established a SID on Main Street and aided in the development of a TIF on Bryce Road. We are currently in discussions with businesses on both Livingston Avenue and Hamilton Roads that will lead to business associations or maybe even additional SIDs. But we do need you to encourage incoming businesses to consider us. We know that one of your desires in the Linden area is for more community involvement. Well, that is far from a concern on the East Side. Secondly, we need you to assist the Greater East Side with the establishment, identification, and creation of self-sustaining businesses that can be supported by city contracts. You buy supplies, equipment, and soft services from many sources to do the work of the city. We propose using the Cleveland, Ohio Evergreen model, where a company is created and staffed by the residents that live in that community. The initial startup cost is obtained through nonprofit organization, private investment, city funds, and yes, even the workers themselves can invest in the business. This industry can be housed in existing structures such as Eastland Mall or any of the many abandoned retail stores on other East Side locations. Lastly, Mayor Ginther is seeking to establish entrepreneurial support organizations, or ESOs. This program, quote, delivers training, advertisement, and technical assistance to assisting and aspiring small businesses. Eastland Mall has lost its anchor stores, but is now a growing hub of small boutique shops, services, and food establishments. Bring this program there and expand it to additional entrepreneurs. We also propose saving money by reusing or revising current corridor plans instead of going out for new ones. All of these requests will create sustainable jobs, employee owner investment in the businesses. All of this would occur in East Side areas of affordable housing within walking distance or a short car or bus ride. And also, the Greater East Side meets another one of the mayor's goals by being one of the most diverse parts of the city. Elevate the Greater East Side on your priority list of inquiring developers. You can do that today, and you won't have to spend a penny. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Barnes. Appreciate your comments and your work on the East Side. Thank you. Director Shoney, if you could address that. And I would also like to ask Director Brown to talk about the supplier diversity and different efforts that your department is doing.
Thank you, Chair Page. I do have to say I agree with Ms. Barnes that we have never had a challenge in getting community involvement on the East Side. And I say that a little bit tongue-in-cheek, but I really and truly do love the involvement and dedication that we have from her and her colleagues and her neighbors. And the efforts to organize the Greater East Side have really helped us understand the East Side better and understand what the opportunities are. We're constantly trying to sell every side. I mean, to address the question, I think we're constantly trying to sell every part of the city. Some of that really comes down to developing an understanding. So some of the success we're having on Bryce Road really grows out of the fact that a couple of years ago we did a market study on the Bryce Road corridor so that we could better understand what the market was there. That way, when we talked to people to go and sell, we weren't selling like we were selling every other place. You know, it's a great place to live. There's lots of cars that go by this, then. No, we had real data to go with it. I was talking with Ms. Barnes just the other day about our plans for the Hamilton Road corridor to start taking some of those similar kinds of efforts there, so that as we're out talking about it and as we're out selling it, we're telling the same story. One of the great things about that side of town is that we always know that once we have the data, we have other people who are going to help us tell that story. And so I do really appreciate their advocacy and their partnership.
Thank you, Chair Page. I would just add that one of the core functions of our office is to work with small business owners who have an interest in doing business with the City of Columbus. In addition to that, we go a step further and really seek to understand what their needs are so that they can be successful in their business. Should they inquire about doing work with the City of Columbus, or just in general are looking to grow and develop their business. So I would encourage or welcome the opportunity to connect with the speaker to hear more about those concerns and making sure that we're getting connected with those business owners to understand their needs and provide the necessary support that they need. Thank you.
Thank you both. And our final speaker this evening is Ms. Sarah Loken with the Community Shelter Board. Welcome to Council again, Sarah. We appreciate the work that you do, particularly for the most vulnerable residents in our city, and you have 3 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Page. Thanks for the opportunity. I'm Sarah Loken with Community Shelter Board. We would usually comment on the budget at the hearing for the Human Services Committee, but we missed that, so thank you for allowing us to be here tonight. Your longstanding investment in Community Shelter Board is an investment in 16 different agencies that deliver services across the community to people facing homelessness. Mayor Ginther and this council stepped up in a significant way in 2018 to fund programs and services that help more than 12,000 people. So thank you for that. The proposed budget as it stands for 2019 is just $75,000 shy of keeping the homeless system funded at 2018 levels. We are asking for your support to close that $75,000 gap to help us stay whole. Thanks to your support and partnership, we did a lot of terrific things together in 2018. More than 300 families who were on the brink of homelessness and called the homeless hotline were helped to find a better option than coming to shelter and did not become homeless. More than 200 people who were homeless on the streets got help from our street outreach team to move directly into housing, bypassing shelter altogether to get off the streets. 1,000 families and 5,000 single men and women were kept safe in emergency shelters. 900 households in shelter were helped to get rehoused and restabilized very quickly, and more than 2,000 people, all of whom are disabled, thrived in permanent supportive housing this year. And none of that could have happened without your support. We will oversee dozens of programs in 2019 to keep people safe, help them find housing, and help them get back on the road to self-sufficiency. But we can't do it without your help. We are respectfully requesting your support to close that $75,000 gap and keep the homeless system funded at current levels. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sarah, and thank you for your comments and again for the work that you do.
Thank you.
Are there any additional comments from the department? And thank you. Well, that concludes the public speaking portion of our hearing. And again, I would like to thank you all for attending and for your comments. It is the work that you do out in the community that keeps us going and lets us know different areas where we need to increase the city's efforts. And this is the part where I thank everybody in the room. I'd like to thank Director Shoney and Director Brown for attending, as well as Bill, again, for the work that you do in your departments, but also speaking specifically about your proposed budget for 2019, letting the residents of Columbus know what your vision and plan is. And I would like to thank the 4 individuals who are up here with me, Andrew Dyer, Mac Arison, Rolanda Hampton, and Charles Newman, who did all the work to put this together, and just really appreciate all that you've done throughout the entire year. It's been a pleasure working with each and every one of you. And also thanks CTV. This concludes our public hearing on the 2019 proposed budget for the Economic and Small Development as well as Housing Committees. And thank you all and have a wonderful evening.